Oh, there we go. That was weird.
Mhm.
Gave me a couldn't do it for a second. And get to the X.
Let's put the X in set. I was like a hustle. Yes.
Hello there, Hawkeye fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on HawkFanatic.com. It is Friday morning, July the 28th, a little bit before 9 a.m. Central Time. Don't adjust your audio or anything like that. Your YouTube, we're a little early. We're usually a little after 9, but got to get out of here a little bit early today. This may run for an hour and a half, something like that, hour and 15 minutes. But we got to get out of here around 10:15, just so you folks know. I am Rob Howe. That is Scott Docterman. If you're watching on the YouTube feed from The Athletic, we are back from Indianapolis. I was back on Wednesday after Iowa was done. Scott was back late last night, and it's kind of just a blur, those things these days, Scott. It just kind of it's like, traffic passed him by, it passes by, and there it goes.
Yeah, it's honestly the last couple of days was it was a complete blur. There's so much going on, and I get usually about a month to month and a half's worth of material, not only just Iowa, but really a more Big Ten and national perspective. So, I'm like, okay, now what happened when our Harbaugh spoke? I really didn't know because I wasn't there. I was, off with like Nebraska doing something and, doing, believe it or not. Yeah. And then some Big Ten stuff. So, and then trying to remember what happened. What did Iowa talk about? And I'm like, I don't remember, so I don't know. I guess when we're old dudes now, I guess we reach the moment of truth. So.
Yeah, Illinois didn't disappoint with summer construction this year for sure. There was plenty of one lane deals going on there, and so that was fun as well. And but yeah, it was. I think going in, you had the Northwestern topic that we had talked about, and I totally on board with the guys. The student athletes who decided not to go there. I think that was a wise decision. Obviously, the Northwestern interim coach had a filibuster ready to go at the podium and didn't leave much time for questions. I did not get to his on the side, so if you did, you can speak to that a little bit because that was kind of the main top. That was the main, I guess, news view of the 2 days.
Yeah, I would say that Harbaugh, and then of course the Bama dropped PJ and
the Minnesota stuff.
Yeah,
the non-football stories.
Yeah, right. I would say starting with Northwestern, it was the right move, and in fact, pretty much every athletic director or most athletic directors, certainly the ones that had issues going on, were around. Where was the Northwestern athletic director? I guess he did an interview with BTN, but you might want to answer some freaking questions once in a while, and instead of subjecting your coach who's only been there 12 days as the interim coach or something like that. I mean, that's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask of him. I mean, he just got there from North Dakota State, and now you're putting him in that position. Well, I think overall I didn't go to his side. We had a couple of people from the Athletic who did. I think he handled himself really well, the way it sounds. So good for him and good for the way he projected it. I don't know that it's going to matter on the field. I think they're in a very difficult situation this year. They were anyway. I mean, they've lost 11 straight games, but and I think it was absolutely the right move for the players not to go because they're not going to talk football there. We're not going to ask them football there. And none of the people there were going to do that. I mean, it was going to be all about, and anything that's football related has a sliver into the situation. Well, how are you guys handling this? What's you going to do? So there's nothing to be gained. It's an honor for them probably to be chosen, but it would not have been a fun half an hour for them. So I think it's the right move. I respect him for that. I think Northwestern, Northwestern's upper management has been as pathetic as any upper management I've ever seen. They just, going all the way back to Fitz, and I'm not going to question whether or not that was the right move to fire him or not. But if you have an investigation for 7 months and then a student newspaper finds out all this information, and then 2 days later you fired the most popular person that you've ever had in your program, you didn't do your effing job, dude. You should have known all this before the investigation was finalized. And it was like, oh, really? I didn't know that. Oh, well, I got to think on this. Okay, you're fired. And then you don't show up. You don't talk to anybody. I guess they did talk to the Daily, but, oh, we got new information. Why the hell did you have an outside investigation with a former, attorney general? So going all the way, circling this around, the, Northwestern interim coach, David Braun, I'm sorry, I was going to say Ryan Braun, but I get it. But, he did an outstanding job for what he could do. That was a very difficult situation. But I think the rest of Northwestern, I think a clean slate is probably what needs to happen.
Yeah, I know was it the associate head coach who was named in one of the most recent lawsuits? And that's, I think somebody from your organization asked him about that. And I mean, what's he going to say? To me, that's for the AD, not for the interim coach. I mean, he's been there a shorter amount of time than I forget the guy's name. The assistant.
David Braun?
No, the assistant that he was associate head coach who was named in the most recent one for seeing hazing and not doing anything about it.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember his name. He's an offensive coach. And
Bajakian?
That might be right.
Okay.
But
I didn't see
that. I mean, you have those guys on the staff that, that was a good question, but how's he going to answer it? Is he going to come in as an interim coach? That's not, it's not his call. That's the AD's call. If you have guys on your staff that are being named in lawsuits, the AD should be there to say why the guy is still on the staff, or, what's the status of a guy who's just been named in that. And there's nobody there to answer that question.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to have, say, Braun up there for the 15 minutes on television, and then it should have been Derek Gregg taking questions for 45 minutes.
Yep.
That would have been the way to do it. Don't put your interim coach who just got there in that position for 45 minutes. And certainly don't put your athletes who smartly backed off. And instead, here you are. He did like some sort of interview, I guess, with BTN. I did not watch it. He was with Dave, and Dave's a pro. But it's just I think that every single step they've done is wrong. From the very beginning. And this is just another situation where I think they need a clean sweep from the president on down. Nobody has handled this even at an F level. It's been more like a 0 level. Yeah,
no question. And it's going to be a long, long season in Evanston for sure. And we won't even make it to Evanston. We'll be in Chicago at Wrigley Field for that game.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see what that organization looks like at that point in the season. But I'm sure this is a story that's just going to continue on and on here. They're going to have their own media day on campus, which will be another opportunity for the administration there to do something to inform the public and, stand up for their athletic department. But we'll see what happens there. The Harbaugh thing, he bought somebody hamburgers, I think, like that, something like that. Wimpy. He bought Wimpy a hamburger today that he'll get paid for on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But, that one to me is kind of silly. 4 games seems like a lot for that. But again, it's kind of like the gambling thing. It's a violation. It's a violation. You get caught. What are you going to,
Well,
I know. The NCAA does not make any sense. And we should not be surprised at this point that this shit happens.
Yeah, this one was, I think some of it was more COVID related, that they were recruiting during COVID. They were watching Zooms went during a dead period of Zoom workouts. They were, talking to players when they weren't supposed to. Just and then he lied about it. That was the bit.
Yeah.
So if he would have done that, I don't know if they would have been docked. I mean, then probably, for doing recruiting during the COVID dead period and stuff, and then you probably get dinged, maybe a couple scholarships, maybe some official visits, maybe a fine, but then lying and misleading, that's where you get the 4 games. And then some of the other coaches did too. So, he was pretty buttoned up about it. Apparently I didn't get a chance to get over there. I was kind of running around, but it certainly was an eventful couple of days when it came to the coaching front with Michigan now. I mean, and you think about it, now the first 4 games that he's supposed to be suspended for are basically like 4 kids' day practices. I think they play I don't even remember. They play
the non-conference is ridiculous, and then they play Rutgers to start at home.
Yeah, all 4 at home. Bowling Green's one, UNLV, East Carolina's I think the first one, and that one could be. I won't even say it, but they're not the worst team in the world. They're a bowl team, caliber bowl team. So when they should coast in those games, win comfortably, I would assume. And so it's not the biggest deal in the world that way, but you are a 2-time, you've been to the playoff 2 consecutive years. You won the Big Ten title 2 consecutive years, and you've got a chance to probably be among, if not the favorite nationally. And this is really a black eye for the organization that tries to do it the right way, and of course did not. So I think there's some, and then, you move over to the PJ Fleck situation, which I'll have a story on later this morning. And it's just, I think that one, I'm very, very skeptical on the accusations levied. I think they've been embellished. And I think this is where, there's a lot of validity in most of the accusations we've heard, and, the team we cover, Iowa to Northwestern, to Michigan State with Nasser, to Penn State with Sandusky, to all these horrible scandals that seem to be piling on the Big Ten. This ain't one of them. I think this one is the one that I'm like, I'm not buying this. So now, they had their own issues a couple of years ago with, the sexual assaults in Dinkytown and stuff. But This one, to me, I'm just, color me very, very almost cynical. I'm skeptical on.
I obviously didn't hear all of the coaches respond to it, because like you, I was doing different things when other coaches were talking, particularly when it was the podium. But I think you don't want anything like what happened at Iowa, what happened at Northwestern, what these situations where, there's an investigation and they're bringing in people to, file a report on abuse in your program and or bias and things like that. But it does, I hope, at least moving forward, put these programs, coaching staffs, universities under the microscope a little bit more, that this behavior becomes more and more rare, that they know. And these questions were being asked, and I kind of was listening, Coach, what do you do to make sure these things don't happen in your program? And I heard some coaches talk about it, some on the main podium. I heard Kirk talk about it on his side podium. And for those that are listening, we get various opportunities to talk to these people in different areas of Lucas Oil on the field. So I don't even probably need to differentiate when we're talking to these guys. But anyway, I digress. I think that being asked those questions puts in your mind, maybe I can't be the way I used to be. I can't, a lot of the coaches talked about old days when hazing was it was a part of the game, and that stuff needs to be out of the game. This shit needs to be out. All this stuff where you're doing this, these mental, imposing your culture system. It needs to happen organically. Obviously, you're the leader. You have control over it, but it needs to be more productive, more positive. And Kirk talked about it a little bit, the days of beating guys down and stripping them of everything and then trying to build them, that can't be the way it is. It needs to be a welcoming culture. It's tough, Scott. It's football. You have to be hard. You have to push these guys for their own safety on the field. But there has to be a line, and we've seen too many programs cross that line, and it's got to stop.
And we've seen a gradual, almost a glacial pace, but it's been a lot of changes, and you've seen, I would say, almost weekly, certainly monthly, where coaches, men's or women's coaches, from all kinds of sports have dealt with, player issues, and how whether they're too, demeaning or demanding, whether they're, how tough they are. I mean, and the coaches stand up for themselves too. I mean, I would say that, going way back here now, I mean, almost 10 years ago with Tracy Griesbaum, probably would not have, the situation may have been different had those allegations come out 10 years later than what they were then, because they were very, very strong against
And if you
her.
even go back before that, Scott, with Gail Blevins.
Yeah, exactly.
Great coach, and that was the end of her career.
Yeah, and she walked away. I mean, it wasn't easy, obviously, but she walked away from it. Griesbaum did not, and Griesbaum ended up winning a trial that, I think if Jane Meyer wasn't a part of that, then maybe she wouldn't have won. But regardless, that's local to this campus. But I think that there is a come to Jesus moment for the coaching industry, that you've got to adapt to your players, and the way that we were brought up or coaches were brought up is changed. And whether that's, there are no more two-a-days in football. There's no more
junction boys.
Yeah, there's no more no water Wednesdays. That was always crazy. No water Wednesdays. Some places had, and because you got to be tough and you got to suck it up and all that. Oh no, you're going to kill your player is what you're going to do in the heat, and punishments, getting up at 6 a.m. and running stairs. I still struggle with that one. I'm like, they should do that if they do something stupid, but they not, and like PJ said, what they did was then at 6 a.m. they had to go clean the weight room. They didn't use like physical activity as a punishment because they're not allowed to. So there's all kinds of different deterrents, but and it becomes kind of this Gen Z versus Gen X / Boomer approach. And I think it's going to be something where there's always going to be friction as to how much can you do, how much can you treat, but really it borders, you got to make this not a negative environment. You got to make it a positive environment. And you can encourage your leadership to do what it takes, but don't demean your teammates in doing that. And whatever horse shit Northwestern was pulling in its locker room, which is sounds to me more, fratter bullshit, stuff that goes on in fraternities than it should on football. But even then, he shouldn't go on in fraternities either. But, all the days of flushing guys' heads down the toilet and, romper room crap, that needs to end. It's got to be about being a positive environment. And, PJ's like, we don't recruit people, we select people. Kirk is that way too. Hey, we bring they're all in the same team, and these players need to compete right away and contribute right away. So there's just a lot here, I think, that needs to be constantly educated. And when you start throwing in NIL and you start throwing in all the student athlete bill of rights, and I think that maybe needs to happen, some sort of student athlete bill of rights, then I think that's when, a lot of this will stop and at least turn the corner anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll help if the athletes have a little bit more bigger voice. And I think the NIL transfer portal give them that. And again, there's that fine line, gray area, whatever cliche you want to lose. You're not going to make 110, 120 people happy in a football game. They're going to be disgruntled players. And I don't know enough about the Minnesota situation. You know more about it, and I know you'll have a story later today talking to Coach Fleck. But if that situation, at least on the surface, and I'm not the one investigating, seems different, much different than the Northwestern situation. And that's going to be moving forward. You can't just have a disgruntled player taking down a football program. There has to be, that's why I think it's important to not have these football programs, Scott, isolated from the rest of the athletic department. There has to be some oversight. So you have, if there is an issue like that, people could come up right away and say, I have a problem, rather than after the fact or trying to get revenge or something like that.
And that's the problem when you have players like, in PJ's case, when he got there, he did dismiss some players. And
I think most coaches kind of maybe not out and out do that, but they encourage it or say, listen, this may not be the place. And that's just the business side of this.
Right. And now that, especially now when you have an open transfer portal, it shouldn't be an issue. Now I feel for what happened more at Colorado, where all these players were like, you're out of here, you're out of here, you're out of here. But again, the business side works both ways. When you have the ability to walk out whenever you want to, well, they have the ability to replace you when they want to. Mm-hmm. And I think in this case, where one player was complaining that, mentally he wasn't in a good spot, and PJ say, how are you today? And he's like, oh, I don't know. He's like, well, you're not elite. And, quirky, maybe dorky or something like that. Yeah, I can get that with PJ, but the clapping when he does it for energy, that's what the players were saying. And he said, and he's like, it's not for me. It's for, hey, we're practicing. We've got a meeting. We want to get high energy. So we stand up, we clap, we get really, energetic. And that's how we start our day. And, whether it's, whoever comes in the room, we do the same thing. So it's, it's different. It's kind of like, I always says we're not for everybody. Well, obviously PJ Fleck's not for everybody either, but there are people who swear by it, and they feel like this is the way I want to be, that all the mantras and acronyms and slogans. Some people roll their eyes at it. Some people say this is the way I want to live. And if you don't like it, that doesn't mean somebody's wrong. People in Iowa and Wisconsin will laugh at it. That's fine too. But just because you didn't want to be in it and he kicked you out, and then there are other things that he really took offense with, which was like the drug testing and accusations of him, that some players got out of drug testing. He's like, it's handled by Drug-Free Sport. We don't touch it. And from anecdotally, a few of the people that I talked to that are very, very close to the program said, look, they still suspend for marijuana, which most places don't. And it just seems to me that we've got to be careful, and media especially has to be careful, because you don't want to smear somebody's reputation based on a couple of semi-baseless allegations. And he called them baseless. Are they completely baseless? I don't know. If people feel the way they feel it that way. But I think overall we got to take them seriously, but before they hit the airwaves and X, I guess is what it's called these days, that they actually need to be vetted thoroughly. And I'm all for anonymous sources and whistleblowers, but you got to be extra scrutinizing of them. And in this case, it certainly was not.
No doubt. And it's really just making sure that your program and your system is fair, equitable, and, as you said, welcoming, positive. You can win that way. You don't have to tear people down to win. It's not, and I would say it's counterproductive to do that these days. I think you can get more out of, I don't know. I certainly was never talented enough to play college football, but I can see people being attracted to PJ Fleck and what he does, and that energy and getting people going. And Kirk Ferentz is not that way, and he's successful that way. Mm-hmm. And everybody's. I hate I hate the saying there's a lot of ways to skin a cat because I don't
Yeah.
know, it's just disgusting and I don't know who came up with that. But the idea of there are different ways to succeed
Yeah.
and doing it in a positive way. Some of it's, the rah-rah and some of it's not.
Yeah. Well, it's like people are motivated differently in every single aspect of your life. If some people like fire and brimstone, it gets them going. It's like, they want that loud, focus that somebody may give them, like, what the hell are you doing here? Let's get going, and then that reinforces them. Some people turn away, they shell up over that. And that's fine too. That's just, you just got to understand the way people are motivated. And as we saw, as you said, Kirk, for somebody like, let's say, Jack Campbell, Kirk is the right person for Jack Campbell. Understated, focused, single-minded, just really, that's the way he deals with things. But some people want that rah-rah. Some people feel like this is for me. This is exactly what I want. So I think overall, what needs to happen here is, just again, every program needs to decide how to approach this in a positive way. And not all interactions are going to be positive because we're talking about humans judging humans. People are going to play that some people believe shouldn't be playing, and some people are going to be sitting on the bench that other people think should be playing. And you go to school to play football and you get mad because you're not playing, or you get hurt, or you don't feel like you're 100% healthy. And then you tweak your hamstring in a rainy night in September, and you don't play again till the last regular season game, or, just there's all kinds of different things that, people go through. And I think each individual, toughness matters. I mean, we've seen people play hurt because they want to play hurt, and other people who have a sprain or an owie even, I can't play. So it's just, I think you take this case by case, look at the facts, try to evaluate it, and make a judgment call as to whether or not it's worth reporting, how much, but it all really needs to be validated. And Northwestern certainly was, and Minnesota, in my opinion, was not.
Moving on to some Iowa-centric, Hawkeye-centric topics. Was not there yesterday, but I saw some folks, not sure if you got to it, talk to, Jim Harbaugh, Blake Corum about Cade McNamara, got really positive feedback. And Kirk brought it up the other day. It is similar to the Jake Rudock, CJ Beathard with McCarthy and McNamara. There's just, in each situation, you had two guys that were capable of being starters, and a decision needed to be made on one or the other. And Michigan benefited from Rudock going there, and now hopefully Iowa can benefit from Cade McNamara, who, by all accounts, and I think you talked to Michigan players before. This is an opportunity for them to support a former teammate, for Harbaugh, somebody who he recruited and liked a lot. So hopefully this works out for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember when Rudock left, he still had a lot of supporters at Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember one of the late basketball games that season, after the football, way after the football season. So it was like in early March when, Gazelle and Woodbury and all those guys were out there. And I looked, and Jerry Palmer was like, hey, look who showed up. And it was Jake Rudock, and he was standing outside the men's basketball locker room, and we talked for 5-10 minutes. He's always been a super young man, and then I'm like, well, so what are you doing here? He's like, well, I'm friends with Mike. I wanted to say hi, and these relationships, they're, for a lot, if not most fans, they're very transactional. It's like, as long as you play for us and play well, I'll support you. But once you're gone, you're in the rearview mirror, and I don't care about you, buddy. Or if you don't play well, then we don't even want you to come back to help out the team, in a free capacity, which is what we saw this week with some of the Spencer Petras stuff after I posted it. And, but Jake was a fantastic young man. But, Kirk was right. The best player was CJ Beathard. It's been proven. It was proven that year. It's been proven in the NFL because CJ still has a job. He's number 2 in Jacksonville, and probably will be unless he gets hurt, he'll be a 10-year guy or more in the NFL. So there's no wrong answer there, and Iowa was smart enough then, way before the transfer portal, to not have any problems because the Big Ten had that conference transfer policy. Didn't touch it. And whereas, Cade McNamara, I'm sure people in Michigan, he was a team captain there. They're happy for him too. And they should be, and then if they play one another, you can guarantee that you can bet your ass both sides are going to be ultra competitive and trying to beat the other one.
Yeah. Blake Corum called Cade McNamara a warrior and said, hopefully I'll meet him here again, meaning Lucas Oil Stadium in the Big Ten championship. Could happen. The predictions, the media poll came out earlier this week, and Wisconsin edged Iowa for the West Division by a vote, I think, and Michigan is the favorite in the East. So certainly a plausible outcome at the end of this season. We'll kind of see how things shake out. A lot of times what we think in July and August ain't what we see in November and December. So we'll see how things play out.
Yeah, I don't give it a lot of validity because we're not allowed to participate. They for whatever reason, the Cleveland.com got mad at the Athletic for taking a couple of their reporters, so they banned the Athletic from participating.
I wasn't aware there was an animosity there.
Yeah, so I'm like,
we all just get along.
Hey, and you know what the funny part is, Brendan Quinn does the basketball one for the Athletic, and then everybody else is involved, but for whatever reason we can't be involved in theirs. But so yeah, I haven't voted in it. I mean, it's like Kenny Kennington got to vote in it like a month after he got here, so it's like he has no idea. I was the favorite to me, no question in my mind. Now Wisconsin maybe has a higher ceiling than Iowa does if things work out right. But you're going to have to you're going to have to take a leap of faith with Wisconsin. I talked to Tanner Mordecai a little bit yesterday, and Luke Fickell was an outstanding coach when he was at Cincinnati, got him in the playoff. Well, PJ Fleck got Western Michigan to 12-0. It's not automatic that you go there and do that. Matt Rule, Scott Frost was 12-0, 13-0. They were their own national champion, remember? And then didn't have a winning season there. So there's no automatics with going from from doing that. So, and switching the offense. Yes, they've got a great offensive coordinator coming in, and Phil Longo. They got a quarterback who likes to throw it all over. They got a bunch of new receivers. That's not automatic. You just don't know. I mean, you could have a bad day and it could not work out the way you wanted it to. And of course it could work out and they could be great. But I just, at this point, to me, Iowa's more of a sure bet. Iowa's defense was better than Wisconsin's last year. This year, they've got just as many pieces, if not more. In fact, losing Jack Campbell and Seth Benson were huge. Campbell was outstanding. But Nick Herbig and Keanu Benton were pretty damn big, too, for Wisconsin. So they've got to replace them. And I expect Wisconsin to be pretty good. But will they, they were, 7-6 last year? They lost to Minnesota. They lost to Iowa, almost lost to Nebraska, So I just think right now that it's, I think it's premature. I think it's wishful thinking. This is what happens in our industry all the time, that when it comes to football, that people like, I follow we're like cats following the laser pointer. It's like, oh, that's new. That's cool. And oh, that's stale over there. Iowa, boring. They're doing the same thing. Oh, Brian Ferentz, they're going to suck. Well, no, they're not. So that's bad.
I think Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois. I would not be surprised if any of those teams won the Big Ten West. The other teams in there, I would probably be surprised. And maybe I'm selling Nebraska short. I mean, Matt Rule seems like a likable guy, seems like he's saying the right things. And he's won where he's been other than the NFL. I mean, he's won in college.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's replacing and everybody's, got a lot that we know because the portal, it changed. I haven't dug in yet, but I have faith in Fleck and Bielema as coaches. I think those guys are going to put their teams in position to win, whether they will or not. I certainly would put Wisconsin and Iowa above those two, but I think those two teams are right in that next tier, which is pretty close to Iowa and Wisconsin.
Competitively, I think Minnesota could be, on the field decent. The problem is they play Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah.
And when you throw those two in there, that's like two automatic losses versus let's say all the teams lose to the crossover Goliath. And that would be, Ohio State and Michigan for Minnesota. For Wisconsin, it's Ohio State. For Iowa, it's Penn State. You lose those games.
What's Illinois got?
Let me look. I can tell you.
No, you keep talking. I'll look it up.
Okay. Well, but when you got those two, then you've automatically if you're Minnesota, you put yourself in a position where you have to run the table in the Big Ten. And that includes
winning at Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah, where they haven't won since 1999. And that's the year, Iowa was 0-8 in the Big Ten. So you throw that in there. Oh, it's like you have no margin for error. And so, and Minnesota's replacing a lot. No Mo Ibrahim, no John Michael Schmitz, no, Mariano Morin, just they're losing a lot of really good guys. They are bringing back a few. I think Chris Ottman-Bell is fantastic. And Tyler Nubin at safety is one of the best in the country. But, I think they could be a competitive team with all those teams and maybe beat an Iowa or Wisconsin. I just don't know about running the table. Illinois would probably be the one that I would think would maybe be more in the top three.
It's interesting, Scott, because Illinois plays host to Penn State the week before Iowa goes to Penn State.
Yeah.
So that could be a big swing right there, one way or the other. And then their other crossovers are Maryland at Maryland. We'll see. And then Indiana at home.
The Maryland-Illinois game could be a really fascinating game because you talk about contrasted styles. And Maryland has the most experienced high-caliber quarterback returning in Talia Tagovailoa. And Illinois is just going to ground you up into meatballs. So, that one could be a flip a coin, and styles make fights and who's healthy, I suppose. But, I think, just looking at it, I think Iowa at Wisconsin on October 21st is probably the one that I would point to and it probably should be, this is the last year of the West Division. You might as well get the two most successful teams in the West to claim it. If there was a surprise to me, I don't think I could be more surprised if pigs flew and did backflips in the sun if Northwestern won the West.
I think it's going to be pretty rough in West Lafayette this year too. I think there's good because you talked about the transition at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
With the change in offensive philosophy.
Yeah.
It's changing at Purdue too with less talent.
Yeah. Having Graham Harrell there is going to be really interesting because he's kind of that air raid continuation, but Braum did it in a different way. Right. Hudson Card's coming in from Texas at quarterback. I think Ryan Walters is an outstanding coach, and I think he'll do well.
They'll be better defensively.
Yeah, for sure. And a couple of years ago, they were pretty good defensively. Yeah. It's just they've got to find a way to marry the two, to marry, physical play with, passing combinations and they can upset a few teams. I just don't know that they lost a ton of players in the portal, like their entire defensive line. And you just don't replicate them because they were pretty decent players. So, because they did win the West last year, and they lost like to USC and Auburn and all these teams smoked them. So I think I think it's going to be tough there. Nebraska is the ultimate wild card, no question in my mind, because they've had talent. They just haven't been coached well enough.
And they also need to be better in the trenches.
Yeah.
They have to be better in there.
Absolutely. You don't have to aspire to be Wisconsin or Iowa, but you better know how to play them physically in order to win. And last year's game, they beat Iowa, but that was a shell of Iowa. It wasn't, when you don't want to, I'm not making any excuses for Iowa. They deserve to lose that game, but they certainly were not helped not having Sam Laporta, Cooper DeJean, and then Spencer Petras. Petras wasn't, going to be in the Heisman discussion, but he could at least hand the ball off and call the right protections.
Yeah, no doubt. That'll be interesting. Won't see them till the end of the season. So from Iowa's perspective, Nebraska could, theoretically be playing its best football and further along in this transition by the end of November. So Iowa might get Nebraska's best shot, or they could be struggling like crazy in the transition and just be bottomed out, not bowl eligible, and just laying there. But we saw that last year. Like in a rivalry game, you never know, because it could come up and bite you in the ass no matter what's going on the other sideline.
It reminded me a lot of Iowa 2010 at Minnesota. Fired coach, team that wanted to win the pig. They were just inspired to get something positive out of their season. And they, had onside kicks and everything like that. Nebraska seemed to be really excited about the opportunity of playing Iowa, knock them out of the Big Ten championship game, maybe, win against the Hawkeyes. And Iowa, I think Iowa tried harder than they did in 2010, but they just didn't have the, they pushed the right button. Trey Palmer is the fastest receiver in the Big Ten, fastest receiver at the combine this year. And you put him on a true freshman, just let him go. And once Cooper DeJean was out, and that kind of bit him in the butt.
Trust me when I tell you that I've seen pissed off Kirk Ferentz quite a few times in my life, either at me personally or just in general. And that 2010 press conference after Minnesota, he was salty, man. That was as pissed off as I've seen him, because that was the antithesis of what he tries to get out of his team, which is full effort. And it was not there that day.
Yeah, it was a team that had saw, 2 weeks previously when they're at Northwestern, and with 10 minutes to go, they're up 10 points. And then Ricky threw one of his worst passes, and then Northwestern, Dan Persa came back, scored twice, won the game. And then the next week they had the game against Ohio State and lost that in the final seconds. And it was like, it was the first time that they played the week after Thanksgiving in a regular season game that they scheduled, not the Iowa State reschedulement game. And it was cold, and they were on campus by themselves. And it was like, screw this. They're 2-9. I don't care. That one and the 06 one where Kirk broke his foot kicking Floyd.
On that note, we will take a break and come back and talk a little bit more Big Ten Football Media Day. I want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people with living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at SUI.org. That is SUI.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. We'll hear from a few more of our sponsors, and Scott and I will be back on the other side. And we are back. Thanks to our sponsors. Thank you, folks, for hanging in there during the break. Scott, I guess the gambling investigation rolls on here. I figured it, I'm sure everybody figured we would have a resolution by now. We do not, as August approaches here. We'll be here less than a week. Kirk had said basically that he hopes to get resolution early in camp, but like we've seen with the baseball program and everything else, this is whoever's investigating this thing is on their own timeline, because what we want to be convenient, which was resolved in the baseball season so those guys could get back on the field, and we figured would be resolved by now before training camp started. We may get resolution by the end of August, but we may not.
They could be going into September, and that's where the heat will be applied on the NCAA, which is you've had 4 months to do this, get the shit done. You're talking about, it's one thing, I hate to say it, but with baseball, it happened just then.
Yeah, that was bad timing.
It sucks to be baseball. I mean, if they would have been investigated in October, well, it sucks to be football. But this situation, though, you've had all summer. Let's get it wrapped up, and then if and it doesn't seem like they know who's involved, of course, but it doesn't seem like they know a range of punishments. It doesn't seem like they know exactly where things are going, and there's going to be, and the frustration is there. And it's going to get worse, because how coaches are. There's such, narrow focus of everything. And if they get into training camp and they don't know if somebody's going to play or not because the NCAA, that will get them riled up, both in Iowa and Iowa State.
I think, looking glass half full, at least Noah Shannon and the other guys on the football team can practice. They can start training camp, and at least with Noah, there's depth at his position. So everybody's going to get reps throughout August. And if it come, August 25th or something like that, it's getting close to game week, they still don't know, and he's still ineligible. I don't think there'll be a huge issue there with him sitting out. Of course, they're better with him, but at least it's at a position of strength.
Exactly. And they can survive that, especially against Utah State. If it's like a one game,
What's a Ute? What's a Ute?
They're not the Ute. They're the Aggies.
Oh, that's right. They're the Aggies. Who's the Utes?
Utah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a Native American tribe, and that's how they named the state, after the Native American tribe there. And Utah, Iowa would be a big freaking game in week 1.
If Utah has a conference.
Yeah. I mean,
this year would be, they're still in the Pac-12.
Yeah. I mean, for today, at least, who knows what'll happen tomorrow, but no, I mean, Utah went to the, Rose Bowl a couple years ago. I mean,
it's a good program.
Yeah. In fact, they went last year too. I think they went 2 years in a row. So yeah, they're an outstanding. They're real comparable to Iowa, so that would be a fun.
Isn't Whittingham like one of the longest tenured coaches after Kirk?
Yeah, I think he's number 2, if I recall. So, and they've done they've actually, to me, been the best story of realignment, over the last 15 years, because they moved up and then they've been very, very successful. TCU would probably be the other one. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, I digress. But yeah, Noah Shannon, if he's out for Utah State, not a very good program. More time for Aaron Graves, more time for Y.A. Black, Jeremiah Pittman. They'll be all right. They'll survive that.
Thompson.
Yeah.
It's a deep group.
Yeah. They're all right there at this point. Who knows what the injury bug might bite? I mean, like wide receiver last year, nobody could have predicted that. However, the other positions affected, I don't know. That's a different ball game. I mean, if you're talking about a defensive back or two or some other positions, I think that could really, hamper this team. And Kirk, I don't think he understands the NFL policy is way worse than colleges. Colleges is much better. Colleges have streamlined rules. Colleges, you understand what you're dealing with. It's based on money and what you've bet on, and then all of a sudden, how much, and if it's 200 or less, it's just basically, hey, you read this pamphlet, or I'll read it to you over a video screen, and you say you understand. And then if it's below $500, that's a 10% of your season, or a gain probably after you move it around, but. So he kind of said, well, I wish it was like the NFL. Not this one, man. Maybe others, but not this. So I don't know. I don't know what they're facing. It doesn't sound like it's going to be too severe, but it does sound like there's going to be some problems, at least the first couple of months. And Iowa State, I know, has some issues, significant issues.
Yeah, Kirk said he brought up marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
That was and he's right. I mean, The laws have changed in the country. Gambling is legal in more states now. Marijuana is legal in more states now. So you have to adjust your guidelines to that.
Yeah. But do you think that they've actually, what do you think of the NCAA rules then? I mean,
I think the ultimate thing you're looking to do, Scott, is to make sure there aren't students throwing games, right? That's the ultimate violation here. If you're throwing games or doing gambling on your own team, that is no. Then after that, I think, are you gambling on college sports, particularly ones at your university?
Yeah.
That's a no. A little bit less severe, but that I don't think it should be that hard to police this.
No.
Because everything, as we've talked about through the months here, it's all in an app. It's all public record. I mean, it could all be, all of that information can be accessed.
Right. I guess I look at it this way, that if you want to make this process crystal clear, is if you're a college athlete, you cannot gamble on college athletics, period. You can't gamble on, because you may have a buddy, heck, look at like the Marquez brothers, one's at Illinois, one's at Iowa. And hey, Henry tells Michael that, Spencer Petras isn't going to be able to play. And next thing you know, all right, well, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to tell my buddy to go load up. And you have this situation, so anybody associated with college athletics should not bet on college. I also think probably not bet on your sport at the next level. Don't bet on the NFL. Don't, however, when you start to say don't bet on the NBA, then you're getting far enough removed that, okay, maybe there's a chance that somebody at Iowa was good friends with Keegan Murray, on the football team, and Keegan, and they were talking, but you're getting through kind of different layers. And I understand the NCAA's concern, but to me, that's not throwing anything. That's not damaging the integrity of the game, because Keegan Murray could be telling the same thing to his to the person who serviced his car or his landlord.
Let's not be naive here. For years, bookies have had runners on campuses trying to get inside information, and now it's even more accessible with social media.
Yeah,
because I've got people I'm like, why is this guy following me on X or Twitter, whatever the hell it is?
Yeah.
He works for a gambling site, and he knows that I'm publishing news about a team that can be wagered upon.
Yeah.
So it's out there. So I realize you have to hold the student athletes to a different standard than the public, but what is going too far? What is overboard, and what's the punishment?
Yeah. So I think personally, it's like, okay, I will not gamble on college athletics. If I do, it's a 1-year minimum. And if it's on my own team, it's or on my own school, it's a lifetime. I think that's fair. Yep. And you sign it, and every year you're brought to your attention, then you're risking your career for this. Then, period. Don't wager on college athletics at large, but then also don't wager on your sport at the next level, because, hey, again, football players, basketball players talk, and that would be, understandable for the integrity of the game. But where the intriguing part comes is when you have Riverside Casino, having a suite at Kinnick Stadium, and you have, all these apps and whatever, having commercials during games. And then, you're.
Isn't there a casino that supports the collective?
Yeah. Elite casinos.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you just don't want them gambling and, damaging the integrity of the games that they compete at for the most part. And so I don't know. You got to make some sort of rules. You can't be blind to it, but you also have to, you can't hold this in some sort of negative juncture, I guess.
No, and you can't be so restrictive that these guys can't live their lives and have levels of entertainment that everybody else does, especially when it's so far removed. Like you were talking about, what if somebody on the basketball team was friends with somebody who played football at Iowa who's now in the NFL and playing in the Super Bowl, and just general conversation is telling, his friend about what's going on with his team going into the Super Bowl. And then that guy goes to a party and he's playing the squares or something at a Super Bowl. I mean, you're going to penalize somebody for that? I mean, he technically talked to somebody that has information, but what is he telling them? And I mean, it's too much, I think.
Yeah. And then you start throwing fantasy football and stuff and shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's, most of that's for fun. Maybe you draft your former teammates if you're a player, or your friends or whatever. And, some of that is, and to me, here's another innocent one that could get somebody in big trouble is if let's say you're a basketball player and you have a pool on the NCAA tournament, It's like, well, that cost Rick Neuheisel his job. I should have asked him about that shit when we were there. But, you talk about, innocent enough. I mean, pools everybody's in a pool.
Yes.
So,
did you get any interesting Iowa stories, things like that? I wrote a notebook today that just had some anecdotal kind of stories. Like, for instance, Luke Lachey was looking to pick out a shirt.
Yeah.
And went with the tight end U shirt to wear to spread the brand. He talked about George Kittle, and I thought Luke was pretty engaging. He made fun of Nico Reganey being in his 6th year at one point, and he had a lot of neat stories. And again, he's another guy who this offseason feels confident that the offense is going to be better. And I'm trying to temper my enthusiasm, Scott, when I hear this from, the coaches or the players, because I'm still in that wait and see mode. Because I remember last year, this week, Kirk talked about the growth of his offensive line, the same as he did last year. Now we have guys that are older, and it seems more plausible now that they're going to be better, but I'm still in wait and see mode.
Yeah, no, and I think we all last year gave us the right to be skeptical because, and even so, I thought last year, okay, they can't be worse, right? Well, they were. And, so, and the line play was the area that he seemed to be the strongest and most forceful in his defense and his projection that they will be better. That's his area of expertise. So they better be better. And,
he went out of his way unsolicited to really, really praise George Barnett.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at, we've talked about this a few times, Rob, is when you look at the line and the players returning, there's validity in them being better. I mean, they have a second season under their belt in many cases. Connor Colby and Mason Richmond, second year as starters. Now they're going to be juniors. When you look at Logan Jones, and a lot of his problem was caused by, from the snap, was looking too much at Tyler Linderbaum and how quick he was off the snap. And so he's trying to get the ball back as quick as he can, and he didn't get the ball back far enough. And so he needs to get that rectified. But 700-pound squat, I mean, holy cow, that's
second in the hay bell toss.
Yep, second the hay ball toss in overtime to Jennings Dunker, who
2-time defending champion.
Every time I look at Jennings, I mean, I'm like, oh my God, that guy is so big. He's like the mountain from Game of Thrones. But and then you bring in 2 transfers and Rusty Feth and Dejon Parker, who they're 5th-year guys. They're looking for that opportunity to compete at a higher level. Logan, Kirk is really high on him. And, I brought this up before, Rob, and the potential for this unit is not that unlike what we saw from 07 to 08. And in 07, when Jake was the quarterback, he completed about 50% of his passes. They gave up 46 sacks. Ryan Donahue had 1 million punts, almost as many as Torrey Taylor. Not quite. He had 2 million. But they really struggled offensively in 07, and the line really struggled to block. And it was just a lot of just disconnect. They weren't connected, as Fran would say, on offense. Well, the potential is there when you have guys who are now juniors, who have been starters, and guys who had their first taste of play last year, Bo Stevens, a Jennings Dunker, and then you have holdovers like Nick DeYoung, and so there's the potential for they can go 7 or 8 deep for experience. You figure another year of playing and getting bigger or healthier in the offseason. I expect them to be better. I'm not going to go as far as to say good. I expect them to be competent. And if they can be competent, I really think their running back's really freaking good. I really think he is. I think he's maybe the best I've seen at Iowa with potential, I should say, since Sean Green and Caleb Johnson. And, freshman record, the game against Purdue, notwithstanding the 75-yard run, but the moves he makes and the physicality that he has and possesses, if he can learn to use it, he could be one of the best in the country, even this year. So, that gives me faith there. Now, wide receiver, the book's out for me. I don't know. I just don't know. I think they've got new guys. They got holdovers.
I think they could be a year away at that position.
Yeah. They just have to get open once in a while and catch some passes. I know, not to be too simplistic there, but they have one of the best tight end tandems in the country. They have a line that I think has the potential to get better quickly. I think they have an outstanding running back and a couple of pretty good ones behind him. And then I think they have an upper level quarterback. I'm not going to say NFL caliber, but I'm going to say that he's played at a high level and you know what you're going to get. So when you add that all up, you've got an offense that could probably average 28 points a game. And if you have that and your defense doesn't fall off too much, and if you keep people healthy, then you got a team that's going to go to Indianapolis. And if you have a puncher's chance in Indianapolis, then this might be, the last great year of the Kirk Ferentz era, potentially.
And I think we see some differences. I think we see some different looks, different formations. It's still going to be the same offense. It's still going to be the same foundation. But again, leaning on Luke Lachey a little bit here, he said he has seen some change, some tweaks, the idea of calling plays to the strength of your personnel.
Yeah.
And that, what is Cade good at? What are your tight ends good at? What is this receiver group capable of? We want to be better on the outside, but we don't want to go overboard with how much we put on their plate. It's making all of it work together. And like you said, they're all conference potential, 2 off conference potential guys at tight end, all conference potential guy at running back. And then we'll see at receiver and offensive line. Those to me are the two the spots where there needs to be the most growth.
Yeah. But, really, if I was to say, what is this offense missing that would make me feel a little more confident, would be a really an experienced experienced 6'2", 6'3" guy who can go get passes, Brandon Smith, something like that. I think, I think Ragaini is who he is. We've seen him over time. Get him, you can get him the ball. He'll catch it. He'll find a way to get open. Deontay Vines, I'm still in wait and see mode. I think he's shown that he can play, but is he a rotational guy? Is he a starter, a bona fide starter in the Big Ten Conference? I don't know.
I wonder your opinion, Scott, are the 4 top guys, and I would put that as Ragaini, Vines, Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson. Are they too much alike? Is there somebody there that can be that X?
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't know. I think, to me, I think Caleb Brown is probably better served not to be the X based on his abilities. I mean, he's kind of a hybrid, a running back receiver type that works better as a Z or a slot than he does as an X. And I think, is he going to be more like Tyrone Tracy when you try to put him at X? And does that not work? I don't know. I don't know how he gets off the line. I don't know how good of a route runner he is.
Like you said, he really only has one. Granted, he got tutelage in one of the best places you can, but he's only one. I played running back in high school, so he's got 1 year of wide receiver under his belt.
Right, and he's granted he had Brian Hartline as his, as his coach.
Pretty good guys in that room.
Yeah, and then you got Marvin Harrison and the like. But this is why somebody like Jacob Bostic or even some of the newcomers can come in and make their mark. A Dayton Howard or somebody like that, or Bowie.
This is the key for me, Scott, and I'll see if you agree with this. I think what Luke said is what gives me the most hope if it happens.
Yeah.
And that is adjusting your system to the strength of your personnel.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an X, don't force it. I know that's your system, but find ways to get the ball in the hands of Caleb Brown, wherever it is. If he's in the slot, if you put him in motion on jet sweep, if you put him, you put him in in the backfield. Whatever you need to do, just get the ball into the hands of your playmakers.
Yeah, exactly. And, whether that's, hey, Luke Lachey is 6'6". Don't be afraid to X him out, or even Eric All, don't treat him like a specialist, but maybe do treat him like a specialist once in a while.
Or if it's better having a third tight on, if Stilianos, who Kirk pumped up a little bit the other day, or Addison Estrenga, if you need to go with a third tight end, do that.
Yeah. And 13 personnel has worked for them when they have it, and they're really good at it. So, overall, you could be hopeful. I'd still say that one, you be cautiously hopeful. Let's see what happens. Hopefully for Iowa that they have a few players who can kind of, move forward. But a Jacob Bostic who's 6'2" can really run. He hasn't been healthy since he's been on campus. This is your chance. This is your opportunity to do something special. And, Deontay Vines, same deal. There were some that went out to California and got some extra work, and that really helped them. And I think they've got that chance. And then the newcomers, as we said, that you're not walking into a place where you're like Ohio State going, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to play unless you're Marvin Harrison. You've got an opportunity there. You can go seize it. And even if you're a true freshman and you've got that kind of ability, you're going to play. So, and even if you're a walk-on, same deal. So I think, but that's still the position group that I really look at as the biggest question mark.
Flipping over to the other side of the ball. Somebody asked Cooper DeJean who he thought the breakout player would be on defense this year. And he gave us two guys. As you would expect, Xavier Wongpa, who is following the same path as Cooper.
Yeah.
Got his feet wet in the bowl game, made some plays in the bowl game, and now he goes into the next season as a starter. And the other guy he named was Aaron Graves, who I know you and I are both very high on. So I don't know how I know how it happens for Xavier. He's the projected starter. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Aaron Graves, because I kind of got a AJ Epinesa, Lucas Van Ness. This guy should be on the field more than he's on the field, but we have other guys that have been here a while.
That's the Iowa way on that one. And it drives us crazy. But, the thing is with defensive line, especially interior, it's not that much of a detriment to have them limited, and playing half the snaps, because when it's kind of like with basketball too, where, the team on the floor in the last 6 minutes of the game is the best team to have on the floor in a lot of cases at Iowa. And I think that's the same case here, where when you get into critical situations, the best players will be on the field. And, no offense to Noah Shannon, he's played really well, but we could see that it's not dissimilar to compare Parker Hesse and AJ Epinesa to Shannon and Graves, where Shannon might go to the NFL and stick around for a while and be a tough dude. And he's certainly a stand-up guy.
Playing tight end, though.
No, he won't. No, loses 30 pounds and maybe he's a fullback. I don't know. But Aaron Graves is a guy that we think, he could be first day pick. And I think Y.A. Black has that kind of potential too. And I like Logan Lee a lot. So I don't know that it's just, this is the blessing part of this, that you've got enough players. And, maybe on the edge, there might be a little bit more of a concern not having somebody like Lucas Van Ness, but having, I think Craig is going to take that next step. I think he might be a breakout guy. Joe Evans,
it's more the depth on the outside. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Because I think Evans and what did you just mention?
Craig.
I mean, those two guys I think are really good. I think that gives you two really good guys on the edge. It's just after that, is it Ethan Herkin? Is it Max Llewellyn? Is it, I'm sure you have guys on your list.
Yeah. I mean, and I want to see, and how they kind of move. Everybody knows the other positions. Would it be a situation like, hey, if, maybe they move Logan Lee to the edge and then they have Y.A. Black in there and, they can do a lot of different things. And plus Ethan Herket's been, is a tough dude. He's kind of like Carl Klug to me, except he's an edge guy. And who knows, maybe this is the opportunity for a guy like Brian Allen or Caden Crawford to take that step forward and be on there. I mean, Jackson Filer could have a role if he's eligible. And then there's Jeremiah Pittman who could play inside too. So, they've got a lot of options, and heck, even Aaron Graves might be able to play the edge too. So I think they've got a lot of potential. I know they like Max Llewellyn a lot. I know that Ethan Herkett, when he's played well. He's a tenacious young man. So, there's no Lucas Van Ness today, but I think Graves, Craig, and Black definitely could be those guys.
And then lastly, I wrote, I don't think there's a position that is, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but has been hit harder than linebacker in terms of players lost with Benson. When you look at it this time last year, you had Benson, Jacobs, and Campbell all on the Butkus list, and they're all gone now. So obviously we feel good about Jay Higgins. We feel good about Nick Jackson, but what happens after that? What's beyond that? And I thought Jay did a really good job of talking about those guys the other day. What's back there? He's a super leader. The kid is just, he gets it. He's just so locked into, what's going on around him. It's not just about him. It's about the whole room and the whole position. I think they have really good leadership in him and Nick Jackson, who become really good friends and are going to room together. So that's good to see. But he mentioned that group that we've talked about, Scott, that Jackson Rex Roth, Zach Tweet, Kelby Tellander, Jaden Harrell, Carson Scherer, that same third-year sophomore class. What can they get out of that? And then he also mentioned, the freshman class where you've got Van Kekerix and Montgomery coming back, and then Aiden Hall and Ben Keeter. He's very high on Ben Keeter. He stopped himself a little. So he goes, he's kind of like Jack Campbell in body type and being a tall linebacker, but he didn't want to go there, which was probably a good, smart move.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, but everybody already is, so might as well. Good thing is for Iowa, certainly depth is a concern. And
I don't want to leave out Kyler Fisher too either, because he's beyond those first two. He's the most experienced of the group.
If I was to make a guess, and this is only an educated guess, is I think Higgins and Jackson are going to start. It's just a matter of where. And my guess is that Higgins is probably the middle, the Mike, and Jackson probably the weak side, just simply because Higgins has more experience as the Mike. Yep. The Leo the Leo's position, I think, Jackson Rexroth is a really good athlete, and he set the squat record when he was a D-back, and he just got too big. And they moved him to.
He was the first guy that Higgins mentioned.
Yeah, and I've known his dad since I was 4 years old. So, and his uncle, his dad's younger brother, and I were best friends in kindergarten. So
his sister's a really good volleyball player.
Yeah, right.
It's an athletic family. There's a lot of good athletes in that family.
Yeah, exactly. So I've known him, and known about him for a long, long time. And so when but the other thing is when you have Sebastian Castro, you don't need to play Leo all that often. And when you've got a team like Wisconsin that's deciding to go more spread as opposed to, two tight ends and a fullback, then you really don't need to play them that often. So I think, last year, I think I had it, it's like 74-26 in percentages that they went cash. When you've got Castro who could hit like that, he could pretty much play your Leo anyway. So I don't know that it's that big of a concern. The only question I have then is, is depth in the secondary. I think DeJean and Wampa are elite level athletes, no question. I think Quinn Schulte is one of the better ones in the college football. And we've kind of it's easy to underrate a guy who's a walk-on, but I think the way he played last year, he played like a damn near a 4-star. And, the second corner opposite DeJean is the really concern, can Jamari Harris be what he was 2 years ago when he was an ascending player, and against Kentucky, he looked really good. Can TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee take those steps and be quality backups to where, next year they can step in and be starters if needed.
Because Kirk even said, Scott, I mean, they were looking for a corner in the transfer portal. They just didn't get one.
Yeah, right. So, that to me is, the depth of the secondary. Injuries could impact that significantly, but the first level is in really good chance, I think.
Where are we at? Yeah, we probably should wind this thing up so you can get on with your other responsibilities. Let folks know what you've got going on over at the Athletic. I know it's not all Iowa stuff.
No, I gotta fit in the Iowa stuff one of these days, but I do have a lot of that too coming, but I gotta figure it out. I'm writing about TV in the Big Ten, and it's I talked to people at CBS and NBC and got the breakdown of what each network is doing, and then talking to the Big Ten here in a little bit, getting a little more background. So that should be coming out early in next week. Talked to Beth Getz at Iowa, and I should have something on that. I talked to Brian Ferentz earlier this week, and we'll have something on him too. So, and then around the Big Ten, I've got some other bigger stories, some money stories. Rutgers is still the last of our pieces on realignment. That's coming up, and just finished the first part yesterday with Stu Mandel, and we'll get ready for the big old fashioned editorial part of the process that'll piss everybody off. But anyway, so it's my head was on. I was on like, I don't know where I am, half the time the last 2 days. But
give us a little preview of what you feel like, which direction you're going to go on with the Beth Getz story. I think she's intriguing for a lot of people that don't know a lot about her yet.
Well,
I don't want you to give away your story angle, but what were some interesting takeaways? I
think a lot of with her is how she's positioned herself for this role her whole life. And a lot of what she's done has been accidental, if you will, that she's she wasn't, her plan was, she majored in psychology, and that's what she wanted to do. But people kept saying, hey, you'd be a really good coach. And then she decided to do that. And it's like, well, we think you get more responsibilities, and now you're going to be an administrator. And then you decide, well, do I want to take this next step? Okay, I will. And then here she is bouncing around, and she's like, wow, she's, kind of a rock star. I talked to several ADs there for some stories, and all of them were very positive of her. They'd all say, hey, off the record, is Beth going to get that job? And I'm like, I think so. The only way she doesn't is if Brian doesn't get 25 points a game. But they were all like, yeah, she's really good. She's, one of the more talented people there. And she's managed crises at major levels. I mean, the Minnesota with Norwood Teague and if that would have happened 10 years later, and the Me Too movement, it would have been really big news. Mm-hmm. But she handled that, and she was pretty new at that point, in her job, and trying to manage that. She's got some really good ideas. She's going to have a news conference, not next week, but the week after. So we can all kind of see kind of what's next out of her. But she has some relationships with the collective already. She's in talking to some of the coaches on campus. I'm not quoting necessarily. They're all like, yeah, she's reached out. She's been great. We really like dealing with her. So there's a lot of positives there. And I think the good thing about her is she's been at enough schools that she can kind of combine all of her knowledge and then make it her, but then also make it her own. And she's not going to be lacking resources at Iowa like maybe she did at Ball State. She's got some coaches. She can go at an elite level and compete. It's just going to be about kind of managing the situation, finding the ways to improve the athletic department, move it forward. And then, my anticipation is that she gets the job. I just don't know that they'll open that up. I mean, I think she's a really talented candidate. I thought that as soon as they hired her as the deputy, and it was like, she did say, and I don't want to give too much away, but she did say that the conversation was that with Gary that he didn't think he'd be in that job all that much longer. So
when they brought her in.
Yeah. But she also said, I didn't think it was going to be like 9-10 months later either.
Yeah. Well, hopefully she takes a proactive approach. It sounds like she has that capability and has ideas on how to be proactive instead of reactive, which we've seen does not work well. So hopefully she takes that approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks, we got to get out of here. Scott's got an interview coming up here in 15 minutes. So I want to give him a chance to get more coffee or whatever he needs to do. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you to the sponsors. We should be back regular time next week on Thursday at 9 a.m. Appreciate everybody adjusting to our schedule. And